Hello, welcome to Gentle Wisdom Tales, where you find real-life stories that touch the heart.
The first hard cold of January slid into Marrow Creek the way it always did. Quiet, then absolute. Walter Kincaid felt it in the metal before he felt it in the air. The wrench on his workbench bit his fingers, and the space heater in the corner of his small workshop clicked on and offered warmth that never quite reached his legs. Walt stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his breath and the river beyond the yard. 70 years old, and winter still startled him, as if the world might one day decide to skip it. Marrow Creek never skipped anything. It held on to weather, stories, grudges, and names. He latched the workshop door out of habit and walked toward the house with careful steps. He had slipped once on ice years ago and never forgot the helpless indignity of it. Inside, the old two-story home held a thin warmth. Its floors creaked no matter how many screws he drove into them. The patched walls stayed unpainted. The couch cushion on the right side had collapsed under the weight of one man always sitting in the same place. 2 mugs sat on the counter. He had taken them out without thinking, then left the second one there as if it belonged. He stared at them longer than made sense, then made coffee anyway. The smell was almost comforting. The mail slot snapped just after 10. Walt lifted the stack and thumbed through flyers and bills until one plain envelope stopped his hand. No return address. Just his name in careful, slightly slanted handwriting. Walter Kincaid. His thumb pressed into the paper, leaving a dent. He knew the handwriting. Recognition did not need repetition. Some marks lived in your blood. He carried the envelope to the table and sat down slowly, as if moving too fast might crack him. His name looked formal, almost distant. Most people called him Walt. Only strangers and people who wanted distance used the full version. He slid a knife under the flap and opened it the way he had opened letters in the school office back when he was a teacher. One sheet, folded twice. He unfolded it with the caution of someone handling a truth that might splinter. Walt, my name is Nora Kincaid. I'm Ray's daughter. I know you know that. I know you know me. Even if you haven't spoken to me since I was a kid, I wouldn't write if it wasn't important. I need to meet with you. It has to do with the old property and paperwork that's come up. June Hartwell is helping me. She said I should try to reach you directly before anything gets decided without you. I also need to tell you something about my dad. He isn't doing well. Please, meet me for coffee at Mabel's this Friday at 9 a.m. Nora. Walt read it twice. Then a third time, slower, as if smaller doses would hurt less. Ray's daughter. His niece. He saw Nora the last way he remembered her. A thin girl with dark hair pulled tight, standing behind Ray's leg at a funeral, looking at Walt with a cautious, hopeful fear. People had watched Walt then, waiting to see if he would soften. He had stood like a fence post and let the moment pass. He folded the letter and set it down. His coffee had gone cold. He left it that way. He told himself it was about land and taxes, practical things, contained in folders. Not Ray. Not forgiveness. Not the old night that had turned his life into a single story everyone repeated. But his body betrayed him. Anger arrived first. Sharp, familiar, almost comforting. Ray had taken enough. Now, sick and fragile, he would try to take Walt's refusal too. Walt stared at the sink's chipped porcelain and felt the old fury tighten through him like a remembered posture. By noon, without deciding to, Walt found himself driving to Mabel's diner. He told himself he was hungry. The truth was, he moved toward familiar places when his mind got crowded. Mabel smelled of coffee and grease and old vinyl booths. Time did not pass so much as a circle. Walt took his usual seat at the end of the counter, where he could see the door. Mabel poured coffee without asking. A few minutes later, Hank Dyer walked in, loud in his boots, built like an old truck that still ran. He slid onto the stool beside Walt and studied him. "You look like you swallowed a nail," Hank said. Walt didn't answer. Hank filled the silence the way some men filled rooms. "Town's buzzin'," Hank went on. "You hear about the Kincaid property? Folks from out of town sniffin' around. Developers, riverfront cabins, weekend crowd." Walt tightened his grip on the mug. "Who told you that?" "County clerk was in here yesterday," Hank said. "Said some papers got pulled." Walt's face stayed still. He was good at stillness. In his father's house, the first person to show emotion was the first person to lose. "I got a letter," Walt said at last. Hank's eyebrows lifted. "From who?" Names were matches. Walt hated that he still believed it. "Nora," he said. Hank exhaled. "Well, I'll be damned. She wants to meet Friday," Walt said. "You gonna go?" "It's about paperwork." Hank's mouth twitched. "Everything's paperwork if you squint hard enough." Walt's jaw clenched. "I'm not doing this with you." Hank raised a hand. "All right, but you hear Ray's not well?" Walt's throat tightened around nothing. "That's what she says. Some folks say he's been sick a while," Hank murmured. "Kept it quiet." "Pride. Pride," Walt repeated, bitter. Hank watched him for a moment, then said softly, 30 years is a long time to keep a door nailed shut." Walt stood too fast, bills already in his pocket. The diner noise suddenly felt far away. "Got things to do," he muttered, and walked out into the cold. At home, he went upstairs to the small room he rarely used, pulled open the stiff file cabinet, and found an old folder labeled in his own block handwriting, Kincaid property, yellowed papers, receipts, copies of deeds, county seals. His hands moved through them like the hands of a stranger. Then he found a letter from an insurance company dated decades ago denying a claim with polite language that still felt like a slap. At the bottom, a note referenced an attached witness statement, but no statement was there. Walt searched again, faster, as if shaking the past might make it drop what it had hidden. The reference remained like a missing tooth. He stared at the empty space where something should have been and felt a new unfamiliar pressure inside his chest. Doubt. He closed the folder, as if closing it could trap the doubt. His fingers brushed the bottom of the drawer and found another envelope. Older paper, already opened once. No stamp, no postmark, just one name on the front in handwriting that tightened his chest like a fist. Marianne, his wife. Walt stared at the envelope until the room felt unsteady, and he understood with sudden clarity that Nora's letter was not going to stay contained in paperwork. Whatever he had been protecting for 30 years was starting to wake up. He stared at Marianne's envelope, knowing that once he opened it, nothing would stay buried. The envelope sat on the desk like a dare. Walt stared at Marianne's handwriting until the loops stopped being letters and became proof that someone had once tried to reach him. The flap was already torn open. He must have opened it once, then closed it again without reading, or read enough to stop. He could not remember which. He pulled out the single sheet, yellowed and creased. Marianne's writing was neat, even when she was upset. Walt, not Walter. Serious, not soft. He sat and read. I don't know how to say this out loud without you shutting down, so I'm writing it. When you get quiet, it's like you disappear right in front of me. Evan asked me something today, and it scared me. He asked what happens when people do something wrong and no one forgives them. He didn't say why, but I could see he was carrying something heavy. Please don't teach him that the only way to survive pain is to harden. He watches you more than you realize. And Walt, about your brother. Walt's hand tightened, crinkling the paper. He forced himself to keep reading. I know what you believe, I know what everyone says, but promise me you won't do something you can't undo. Promise me you won't let anger make decisions for you. I'm not saying you have to forgive him. I'm saying be careful. There's more going on than you know, and I'm afraid you'll find out too late. Please, for Evan, for us, Marianne, no date, no detail, just a warning and the weight of her voice. Careful, there's more going on than you know. Walt folded the letter and stood abruptly. He needed air, but not the kind his workshop gave him. The workshop meant hiding, so he drove to June Hartwell. Her office was small and bright, and June looked up from a tidy desk with surprise that quickly turned into calm. Walter, she said, choosing the formal name as if she was handling something fragile. I'm glad you came. I got a letter, Walt said. From Nora, June replied. She wanted to meet Friday, and I still recommend you go. But I understand waiting can feel impossible. Walt didn't like being read. She wrote that things could get decided without me. There are deadlines tied to the old property and to an estate issue, June said. And there are people who move fast when they sense opportunity. Developers. That's one possibility, she said. River parcels draw attention. June slid a folder toward him. I'm representing Nora in a limited capacity, mostly to interpret documents and protect her. I'm not here to ambush you, but you need to see what the county file contains and what it doesn't. Inside were deeds, tax records, and a settlement statement from 30 years ago. It's incomplete, June said, tapping a page. Referenced attachments are missing. Walt's throat went dry. Like the witness statement. June's eyes sharpened. You've seen that reference too. It's in my file, Walt said, but the statement's not. If we find it, June said, it could clarify what was believed about the fire. And it matters because the insurance claim and ownership questions are intertwined. Pressure and coercion matter. Walt scanned another page and stopped. This says Ray didn't receive anything. Not directly, June said. Most of it went to debts and liens. There's also a private creditor listed, and that name appears again in a later transfer. Walt felt his certainty wobble. So the story's wrong. I'm saying it doesn't match cleanly, June replied, and your brother's health is forcing decisions forward. Nora didn't ask for any of this. Ray is sick, Walt said, hearing how bitter it sounded. June nodded once. He's been in and out of the hospital. I'm not a doctor, but Nora believes he's refusing certain treatments. She thinks he's trying to get his affairs in order. Affairs, Walt repeated, and the word tasted like secrets. Estate planning, June corrected gently. Paperwork, not a conspiracy. But when families don't speak, paperwork becomes a weapon. Nora is trying to keep it from cutting anyone else. Walt stood to leave, and June's voice softened. I knew Marianne, she said. Not well, but enough to know she cared about people. If she were here, I think she'd want you to have the full truth. Back in town, Walt drove past a billboard showing a bright drawing of riverfront cabins, warm lights, smiling strangers, a place that didn't exist yet. The idea of his family's land becoming someone's weekend story made his stomach turn. He ended up at Mabel's with coffee he barely tasted. Hank slid onto the stool beside him and took one look at his face. You went to June, Hank said. Walt nodded. The paperwork doesn't say what everyone says. Hank's mug stilled. What's it say? It says Ray didn't take the money, Walt said. Hank exhaled slowly. Yeah. Walt turned, sharp. You knew. I knew it wasn't simple, Hank said. And I knew folks wanted it simple. Folks with influence. Folks who didn't want questions. Who? Walt demanded. Hank shook his head. Names don't help unless you're ready to go all the way. All the way with what? With the truth, Hank said. Hank's voice dropped. Ray's not just not well, Walt. He's been sick a while. Nora's scared. And she's got a boy of her own now. Cal, that kid deserves better than the fight we all kept feeding. Then he lowered his voice. You ever hear the name Cole Mercer? Walt blinked. No. Mercer was around the mill when things got bad, Hank said. Loans, paperwork, smiles, the kind that turn into chains. Walt's stomach tightened, because June had shown him a creditor name. That's him, Walt said, more to himself than Hank. When he finally went home, Delia stood on her porch, bundled against the cold, watching him like she could read trouble the way other people read weather. You're wandering today, she called. You all right? Fine, Walt lied. Walt didn't answer after that. He went inside and shut the door, and the silence hit him hard. On the table he set Marianne's envelope beside June's card, 2 pieces of paper that felt heavier than tools. That night, sleep wouldn't hold. Walt sat at his kitchen table under the stovelight, squinting at the insurance letter's note, a date, a reference number, and a smudged last name that looked like Avery. Reverend Avery. He stared at the clock on the stove. 12:47 a.m. Nora's line, "My dad isn't doing well," finally landed with full weight. What if Ray died before Walt even learned what he'd been hating him for? He dialed the church number from memory. A sleepy voice answered. Marrow Creek Baptist. This is Thomas. Walt swallowed. It's Walter Kincaid. A pause. Walter, it's late. I know, Walt said. I need to ask you something. Silence. Then Avery said quietly, Is this about your brother? Walt closed his eyes. Yeah. Come see me tomorrow morning, Avery said. In person. Bring the papers. Some things don't belong in the dark. The receiver clicked into place, and Walt understood, with a chill deeper than winter, that Friday wasn't the start. Tomorrow was. Thomas Avery met Walt the next morning with the calm of a man used to heavy truths. He studied the insurance reference and the missing attachment note, then looked up. You heard the name Mercer, he said. Walt's fingers went numb. Mercer was there. Avery nodded. Ray told me Mercer was pressuring your father. Foreclosure threats. Talk of salvage and insurance, like they were tools. He slid a single page across the desk, a careful summary of what Ray had told him back then. It described Mercer at the mill, an argument, and Ray pleading with someone to leave. It described Ray admitting he made a decision that would make everyone hate him. Ray believed the fire would be blamed on him regardless, and he accepted that outcome to prevent other consequences. Walt hit the desk with his palm. What consequences? Ray didn't specify, Avery said. He said he couldn't. He could have told me, Walt snapped. Avery held his gaze. Would you have listened? Walt felt how thin his certainty had become. I don't know, he admitted. Avery nodded as if that mattered, then pointed to the last lines. Ray expressed fear for the boy, fear for what Walter might do in grief. He asked for prayer that Walter would not act in anger. The boy, Evan. Walt's throat tightened. He shoved his hands into his pockets. Ray didn't come to be forgiven, Avery said quietly. He came because he couldn't carry it alone. If he cared, why'd he leave? Walt demanded. He stayed longer than you think, Avery replied. But you were a closed door. After a while, every attempt made you burn hotter. Walt started to stand, cornered. This isn't the full statement. No, Avery said. Investigators asked me for what I knew. I kept a note. The full statement, if it exists, could be in insurer files or archives. June can request deeper records. Mention Mercer. Walt swallowed. Ray's sick. Avery's expression softened. Nora's scared. If you can speak to your brother yourself. Walt left with the summary in his pocket. His phone buzzed as he sat in his truck. Uncle Walt? A young voice said. Who is this? It's Cal, the voice answered. Nora's son. Mom told me not to call you, but I'm tired of everybody acting like time is infinite. Walt's grip tightened. Where's Nora? At the hospital, Cal said. With Grandpa. Walt went still. Ray's in the hospital. Yeah, Cal said. And Mom thinks if she tells you you'll show up angry, but if she doesn't you'll hide and then blame her for not coming. You don't know me, Walt said, too sharp. Cal didn't flinch. I know men who use silence like a weapon. Then quieter. He's asking for you. Walt stared straight ahead. Which hospital? Cal told him. 40 minutes away. I'll be there, Walt heard himself say. And don't bring a speech, Cal added. Just bring yourself. At the hospital, Nora waited outside a room, arms crossed like armor. When she saw Walt, surprise flickered, then caution. Cal called me, Walt said. Her face tightened. He wasn't supposed to. Before Walt could answer, Nora lowered her voice. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm asking you not to punish him on his way out. You think I came to punish him. I think you've been punishing him for 30 years, she said, even from your house. Walt glanced through the small window. The shape in the bed turned away. His stomach clenched. Go, Nora whispered. Before he falls asleep. Walt stepped inside.
Ray looked smaller, thinner, older than Walt's anger had ever allowed him to imagine. Ray turned his head and held Walt's gaze, and for a beat neither of them moved. "You look older," Ray rasped. "So do you." Ray's mouth twitched. "Guess we didn't stop time by not speaking." "You here to yell?" Ray asked. "Or you here to listen?" Walt's hand found Avery's envelope in his coat. He lifted it slightly. "I talked to Thomas Avery." Ray's expression tightened. "You talked to Avery? He said Mercer was there." Ray closed his eyes for a second. "Mercer," he said. "Yeah. Why didn't you tell me? You think you would have believed me?" Ray asked. "You had your version by sunrise. By noon the whole town had it. So you let me believe it." "You didn't just believe it," Ray said. "You needed it." Walt felt the words hit somewhere tender. "What were you protecting?" he demanded. Ray's gaze flicked toward the door. "Some things ain't mine to spill in a hallway full of ears," he said. "Not even now." "Then you're dying with it," Walt snapped. Ray swallowed. "I'm dying with a lot, but not all," he called hoarsely. "Nora, get the bag, the canvas one." Nora returned with a worn canvas bag from the closet. Ray nodded toward Walt. "Give it to him," he said. Walt took it. He expected it to feel like proof. It felt like weight. "A piece of the truth," Ray said. "Enough that you can't keep telling yourself you didn't have a part." "I didn't." "You did," Ray cut in, tired but firm. "Not the way the town thinks, but you did." Nora stepped closer. "Uncle Walt, please, take it home. Not here." Ray's eyes pinned Walt one more time. "You think the fire was the worst part?" he murmured. "It wasn't. The fire was just what everybody could see." In the hallway, Cal watched Walt come out with the bag. "That it?" Cal asked. Walt nodded. "Don't be a coward with it," Cal said. Walt's jaw tightened. "Don't tell me what to be." "Then prove me wrong," Cal replied. At home, Walt set the bag on his kitchen table and stood over it until his breathing slowed. Then he opened it. Papers, bound and old. A small key taped to a note in Ray's handwriting. "Walt, red toolbox, bottom tray. Don't do this in anger." Under the papers was a stamped courthouse form. Walt's stomach dropped as he saw the signature line. His name, not printed, signed. The date wasn't after the fire. It was before. He stared at the inked loops the way a man stares at a mirror that suddenly shows a stranger. He tried to pull the moment from memory. His father's voice, a pen in his hand, any clear image of what he had agreed to. Nothing came. Only a blurred sense of strain and urgency, like someone had rushed him past the part where questions lived. Walt sat down hard. For 30 years he had carried a single belief like a brace. Ray took everything. Ray lit the match. Ray destroyed the family. That belief had given his grief direction. It had kept him from looking too closely at his own choices, his own silences.
Now the paper said his own signature had given someone authority. Weeks before the mill burned, he read the title line twice: limited power of attorney, matters related to the Kincaid mill property, and associated debts. Walt's hands began to shake again. He shoved the form back into the bag and pulled out the key, still taped to Ray's warning. Red toolbox, bottom tray. Don't do this in anger. The red toolbox sat in his workshop like an old wound he kept covered with routine. Walt looked toward the back door and felt something in him resist, the way it always had when the past demanded specifics. Walt stood in his kitchen between the bag and the phone, knowing the next thing he did would decide whether the story stayed convenient or finally became true. He reached for the back door, and the past reached back. Chapter 4. In the workshop, Walt lifted the red toolbox tray the way Ray's note had instructed. Beneath it was a false panel. He had never noticed it, not once in decades. He eased it up and found a small lockbox. The key from the canvas bag fit with a stiff turn and a soft click. Inside were 3 items: papers tied with twine, a cassette tape, and an envelope in Marianne's handwriting. Walt untied the papers first. The missing witness statement sat on top, typed, signed, dated, name Raymond Kincaid. Ray wrote about the weeks before the fire, the mill failing, private loans, Cole Mercer pressing their father with foreclosure threats, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Mercer had convinced Walt to sign a limited power of attorney to buy time, promising it was routine, temporary, and safe. Walt had kept it from Marianne, kept it from Ray. In Ray's words, Walt had tried to save their father without understanding the kind of man Mercer was. Then Ray wrote the line that snapped Walt's breath in half. Evan was there. Ray described how Mercer had approached Evan days earlier, offering small jobs, small confidence, and the promise that the boy could help the family. Evan didn't understand what he was being pulled into until Mercer began pouring fuel at the mill. Evan tried to grab the can. Gas splashed across old boards. The fire caught faster than any man could stop. Ray dragged Evan out while fighting Mercer, then sent Evan home with one instruction: say nothing. Walt remembered that night with new eyes. Evan coming home late, pale and shaking, smelling faintly of smoke. Walt yelling about curfew. Evan taking it in silence. Walt had called it defiance. It had been fear. Ray wrote what came after: investigators, rumors, and Mercer's threat delivered with calm certainty. If Ray told the truth, Mercer would make sure Evan was charged with arson and Walt with fraud or conspiracy. Walt's signature gave Mercer cover. Mercer would claim Walt knew, so Ray took the blame that fit easiest. The town already expected trouble from him. He told investigators Evan wasn't there. He said Walt didn't know. He let the town turn him into a villain because it kept Evan out of court and kept Mercer from squeezing harder. At the end, Ray wrote plainly, "Not for law, but for his brother. I tried to keep you from losing him twice, once to a courtroom and once to your own anger." Walt opened the envelope from the lockbox. If you're reading this, it means you finally opened what you refused to face. Your brother is not the only person who made a choice that night. Evan is drowning in guilt. He needs his father, and you need to stop worshiping your pain like it makes you righteous. Let the truth make you softer, not smaller. Marianne's words hit harder than anger ever had because they named what Walt had become. He carried the cassette tape into the kitchen, found the old player in the closet, and pressed play. Ray's voice filled the room through static and hiss. He admitted he should have told Walt immediately. He admitted he thought he could handle Mercer alone. Then he said the sentence Walt would never be able to unhear. "I wasn't just protecting Evan from court. I was protecting him from you." Ray told him grief had made Walt dangerous, that Marianne had begged Ray not to let Walt turn his rage into justice. Then Ray said quietly that Evan hadn't died only because he drove too fast. Evan had died because he couldn't carry the lie, the guilt, and his father's silence all at once. The tape ended with one request: stop feeding the old fire. Walt sat with the hum of the machine and understood, finally, what hatred had done. It had not honored Evan. It had only kept Walt from seeing him. He called June Hartwell and told her what he found. Mercer, the power of attorney, the witness statement. June's voice changed as she listened. "Friday still stands," she said. "We'll protect Nora and Cal. We'll keep the land out of predatory hands." Then Walt drove to the hospital. Nora met him in the hall and searched his face. "You saw it." Walt nodded. "I listened." Ray lay in the bed awake, thinner than before, eyes tired and wary, as if he expected Walt to use the truth like a weapon. "I opened the toolbox," Walt said. Ray closed his eyes for a moment. "Okay." Walt gripped the bed rail because his hands needed something to hold. "I didn't remember signing that paper," he said. "I didn't remember making it possible. And Evan was there." Ray's voice was a rasp. "Yeah." Walt's throat tightened. "He came home and I yelled at him. I didn't see what he was carrying. I made you the monster because it was easier than admitting I'd helped open the door, and easier than admitting I'd gone quiet when my son needed me." Ray's eyes shone, but he didn't look away. "You loved him," he said. "Love wasn't enough," Walt whispered. "Not the way I lived it." Silence stretched. Then Walt said the words he had avoided for 30 years. "I'm sorry." "For what?" Ray asked. "For letting you carry it alone," Walt said. "For letting the town spit your name. For actin' like pain made me righteous." Ray breathed out like something uncleaned. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of Mercer. Scared of what you'd do. Scared of losing Evan." "I still lost him," Walt said, voice hollow. "Yeah," Ray answered. "But not the way Mercer wanted." Walt swallowed hard. "I don't know how to forgive 30 years. Ray's eyes steadied on him. "You don't have to forgive the years," he whispered. "Just stop adding new ones." Walt reached for Ray's hand and held it. "I forgive you," he said, and it felt like setting down iron. Ray's breath shook. "And I'm sorry," he whispered, "for lying, for disappearing." Nora appeared in the doorway, hand to her mouth. Cal stood behind her, shoulders tense. Walt didn't look away from Ray. "Friday," he said. "We'll do the papers right, and the truth doesn't die with you." Ray's eyelids drooped. "Go home and live," he whispered. Walt stayed until Ray slept, and when the end came, it came quietly. Friday was signatures and corrections, not spectacle. June set up a trust that kept the property protected and put Nora and Cal beyond anyone's grasp. Walt signed as a man no longer defending a convenient story. Afterward, Cal showed up at the workshop and tried to sound casual. "You ever teach anybody how to fix stuff?" "I used to," Walt said. Cal hesitated. "Teach me." Walt understood what the boy was really asking. "Teach me how not to become this." He handed Cal a tape measure. "Measure twice," he said. "Cut once." Cal rolled his eyes, but he stayed. In that small ordinary act, Walt finally lived Marianne's last instruction. The truth did not make him smaller. It made him softer, soft enough to hold what was left without breaking it. And that was the moral he'd learned too late, but still chose to practice. Anger can feel like strength, but it is often just fear wearing armor. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It stops the past from stealing the future.
Moral: holding on to anger for years doesn't make you strong. It only keeps the wound alive. Healing begins when you face the truth and choose forgiveness. The end.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more real-life stories.